Lu Sheng happily returned home, carrying a total of 50 neatly packaged premium steaks. He had obtained everything he desired and even exceeded his expectations. Originally, Lu Sheng aimed for an 80% benefit and shouted for 90%. However, to his surprise, with his persuasive tactics and strategies, Ling Su actually agreed. Not to mention, before leaving, he even managed to mooch a whole family bucket of steak from her. Strolling leisurely back home, it was already close to 4 p.m. His mother had finished work early and was busy preparing dinner at home. As soon as Lu Sheng entered the door, his mother caught a whiff of a tantalizing meat fragrance and followed it from the kitchen to the living room. Lu Sheng placed the packed boxes on the table and smiled, saying there was no need to cook today. Hearing that it was a premium steak, his mother's face lit up with a mixture of heartache. Lu Sheng casually mentioned that a friend had treated him dinner and offered him takeout, and that friend happened to be a wealthy individual. It's hard to say what Ling Su, who had just walked out of the restaurant after maxing out her credit card, would feel upon hearing those words. Upon hearing that, his mother's expression immediately relaxed, and she informed Lu Sheng that Mr. Zhang had come to inquire about their family several times. Lu Sheng pondered for a moment, realizing that he hadn't been to school in a long time. He decided to pay a visit tomorrow. The next day, Lu Sheng, after a long absence, returned to the school. When Mr. Zhang heard a knock on the door and opened it, he was pleasantly surprised to find Lu Sheng standing there. Lu Sheng held a potted plant as he entered the office. It was the one he accidentally broke last time. Mr. Zhang could sense a remarkable change in Lu Sheng's aura, exuding an incredible strength. Mr. Zhang handed Lu Sheng a cup of tea while he lit a cigarette and sighed, remarking that after this meeting, perhaps in the future, they would only be able to see Lu Sheng on television. When asked about his future plans, Lu Sheng calmly stated that he was going to participate in the selection for rising military stars. This statement left Mr. Zhang so astonished that he dropped his cigarette. Lu Sheng added that he will also be attending the assessment to become a psychic practitioner. Mr. Zhang jumped up from the couch, covering his forehead with his hand. He didn't know what to say, but he enthusiastically patted Lu Sheng's shoulder and told him to go and conquer his own world. He promised to support and cheer for him from behind. As Lu Sheng left the office, Mr. Zhang watched his figure and realized that he had underestimated him all along. Lu Sheng was not only the school's pride, but also the pride of White Lake City. He would one day become the pride of the entire human race. With the final exams approaching, boredom filled the air in Class 3, 2. The mundane academic subjects made many students feel drowsy, and some even played mobile games discreetly. The class teacher shook his head disapprovingly at the sleeping students and slammed his book on the desk, commanding everyone's attention. He tapped on the blackboard, knowing that many students were aspiring to attend martial art university, but their grades and academic subjects were equally important. He had already lectured them on this countless times, but some students simply didn't care. One student yawned and asked Ming if he could go play League of Legends after school. Ming shook his head and refused, as he had enrolled in an intensive study program and planned to study after school. The student couldn't understand why Ming had been working so hard lately. The teacher noticed them whispering and asked them to stand up just as he was about to give them a lecture. However, at that moment, Lu Sheng walked into the classroom. Lu Sheng greeted the teacher first, and then greeted his classmates. The entire class was astonished, never expecting Lu Sheng to come back for class. Many believed they would never see him again. There were even rumors circulating that Lu Sheng had become the closed-door disciple of Chairman Xiao, or that the mayor's daughter was going to marry him. Some students even rushed to ask for his autograph. Ming was also shocked, and the class teacher looked at Lu Sheng, hastily returning the greeting. Lu Sheng, on the other hand, didn't hold any grudges from the past when the class teacher had looked down on him and ridiculed him in the classroom. He politely asked if he could join the final lecture class. The class teacher quickly agreed, and as Lu Sheng walked into the classroom, everyone suddenly found a renewed motivation for studying. The atmosphere completely changed. The class teacher delivered an engaging lecture, and the students listened attentively. It was incredible to think that they could attend class together with Lu Sheng. Ming stared at the back of his former friend, reminiscing about the times they used to play together, stay up late playing League of Legends, and go to internet cafes. The distance between them seemed to have grown over time. Lu Sheng's aura was different now, as if he possessed the presence of a leader. Soon, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. The class teacher closed his books, and it was the first time in many years that he had delivered such a powerful lecture. Lu Sheng also stood up and bid farewell to his classmates, assuring them that he would never forget them. Upon hearing these words, the students in the class suddenly felt the urge to cry. A strong sense of honor emerged from within them, and they vowed to get into martial art university. Lu Sheng turned to Ming, placing his arm on Ming's shoulder, just like a few months ago. He gave him a nudge, as if nothing had changed. The former class teacher and classmates had all looked down on Lu Sheng, except for Ming, who genuinely regarded him as a friend. Thinking about this, Lu Sheng encouraged Ming, telling him to keep up the good work and that they should play League of Legends together whenever they had the chance. Ming's eyes welled up with tears, deeply moved. He made a firm decision to strive for excellence and work hard to get into a martial art university, following in the footsteps of his best friend. Seated at his desk, Lu Sheng contemplated his next plan while staring at the computer in front of him. This computer had been a gift from his father on his 10th birthday, and he had been using it ever since. Its specs were outdated, and it ran frustratingly slow. Lu Sheng had already informed Snowy about purchasing materials and upgrading his gear. Now, he needed to focus on acquiring a psychic practitioner's weapon. He opened Snowy's email, which presented him with two options, the indomitable wheel of blades and the silver void shuttle. 5 minutes later, Lu Sheng's expression turned somewhat disappointed. Both weapons cost between 30 to 40 million. He closed his eyes and began calculating the required materials for crafting the weapons. Considering the significant amount of primary material, mithril needed for both the wheel and shuttle, approximately 9,000 per gram. A single wheel alone would weigh over half a kilo. That was already over 5 million spent, and he hadn't even accounted for the other auxiliary materials yet. After conducting the calculations, Lu Sheng realized that he couldn't even afford to craft a single item, let alone a complete set of psychic gears. With no other option, he decided he would have to go out and dig for materials himself. Previously, Lu Sheng had found a strategic resource distribution map for materials in the Dream Realm library, spanning 300 years. It would come in handy now. His first step would be to unearth the unexplored mithril mines, and then he could take the materials to a blacksmith for weapon crafting. If he managed to acquire a substantial amount of mithril or iron, he could even sell some to earn money. A win-win situation. A week later. In the lab of the laboratory, Ling Su stood anxiously at the door, glancing at her phone from time to time. She had lost track of how long she had been waiting when suddenly her spirits lifted, and her posture straightened unconsciously. Lu Sheng's figure appeared at the door. Lu Sheng, dressed in a pristine white pharmacist robe, stood tall with a calm expression. His increasingly handsome features were accentuated by the pharmacist attire, exuding a cool and disciplined charm. Although Ling Su was well aware that Lu Sheng was 5 years younger than her, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of attraction. Snapping back to reality, Ling Su quickly spoke to hide the slight blush on her cheeks. The materials for this batch cost nearly 200,000, and Lu Sheng seemed satisfied with the quality. After putting on a mask, he asked Ling Su to wait him outside. Deep inside, Ling Su couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. The launch and sales of the new supplements hadn't even begun, and the profits were still uncertain. In this past week alone, she had already spent close to $1 million just to front the funds for Lu Sheng. 3 hours later, the refining process was complete. Lu Sheng seemed to sense Ling Su's slight emotional state and casually reassured her, mentioning that he would be going out. If all went well, he would have the startup funds, and he promised to send her the money. Ling Su nodded obediently, refraining from asking about Lu Sheng's specific plans. Before leaving, Lu Sheng smiled and remarked that she was quite a tsundere. He bid Ling Su farewell and quickly walked away. As soon as Lu Sheng's figure was no longer in sight, Ling Su took a deep breath and swiftly rushed into the laboratory. The air of the laboratory still carried a faint scent of herbs. Ling Su's eyes scanned the surroundings like a radar, and soon enough, she locked onto a small vial that had been used but not yet cleaned. She held the small vial as if it were a precious treasure, and began a series of skilled maneuvers. This supplement was incredibly powerful, capable of strengthening the bones. On the market, such a supplement a single unit would cost 4 to 5 million, yet Lu Sheng had managed to produce it with only 20,000 worth of materials. However, up to this point, Lu Sheng had refused to disclose any information about this new bone-strengthening supplements. It would have been fine if he simply didn't say anything, but the problem was that he intentionally left behind small hints every time, tantalizing clues. He deliberately tempted Ling Su to discover it on her own, leaving her feeling as if she were being teased, with an itch that was hard to scratch. And the thought of the bulging backpack he carried, surely filled with many of these new supplements, only further infuriated Ling Su. Ling Su had also considered the idea of secretly learning the technique, but the receptionist came over and reported that the surveillance had been malfunctioning the entire time, and that they couldn't fix it. As soon as Lu Sheng left, it immediately started working properly again. Ling Su sighed, nodded, and waved the receptionist away. Lu Sheng being a psychic master meant that he could easily nullify all of Ling Su's attempts, and render her efforts to steal the technique completely futile. Ling Su shook her head, and casually threw the vial she was holding into the trash bin. In neighboring city, on a mountain road, inside a tourist bus, a young and beautiful tour guide enthusiastically introduced the itinerary, and provided information about the scenic spots to the group of tourists. Only a few middle-aged women wearing red travel hats listened attentively, occasionally asking a few questions. During this time, Lu Sheng had been flipping through the resource distribution map every day, combined with the current map of Dongning province. Finally, he found a suitable location. He calculated that he had successfully refined a total of 93 marrow-nourishing pills throughout the week, which should be sufficient for his needs. Lu Sheng noticed a rolling toy ball, and heard the cheerful laughter of a little girl, which brought a lively atmosphere. The little girl asked Lu Sheng if he wanted to play a game with her. The woman with long hair, who appeared to be the girl's mother, quickly apologized, and pulled the little girl back to her seat. Sitting next to the woman was a man wearing glasses, whose middle-aged eyes seemed to contain a powerful aura. He exuded the presence of a level 2 psychic master. Lu Sheng smiled, realizing that this trip would likely be quite interesting. At the back of the bus, a girl with long pink hair and a tight-fitting purple crop top let out a howl, venting her frustrations. Sitting next to her, a beautiful girl with long hair and a quiet demeanor withdrew her gaze from the window scenery and said that Amelia insisted on coming. Amelia snatched Luna's fan and retorted irritably, accusing her of mistaking her concern for Luna's potential heartbreak breakup as meddling. Luna gently patted Amelia's hand, leaning closer to comfort her, saying that it was good for them to come out and relax together. Despite the shortcomings of the tour group, the scenery of Bullhead Mountain was still beautiful. Amelia glanced in a certain direction where the laughter of the little girl could be heard. The little girl was currently playing a ball-throwing game with a young guy sitting in the second-to-last row on the right side. The yellow ball flew back and forth between the seats, eliciting continuous giggles from the little girl. When Amelia saw Lu Sheng, her face turned red. His clean and handsome features resembled a male protagonist straight out of a Manhwa book. The little girl missed catching the ball, accidentally hitting the seat in front. Amelia leaned back and reached out to catch the ball, then tossed it to Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng smiled and thanked her, and Amelia blushed and giggled. Luna chuckled and teased her. 2 hours later, they finally arrived at their destination. As soon as Amelia got off the bus, she scanned the vibrant and somewhat unconventional-looking mountain village. Luna looked at the map while Amelia looked around, searching for Lu Sheng. Finally, she found him, carrying his suitcase as he descended from the bus. The little girl obviously hadn't had enough of the ballgame from earlier, and immediately ran to grab the Lu Sheng's arm, pouting and saying they should play together again tomorrow. Lu Sheng patting the little girl's head with a smile, nodding and agreeing to play with her tomorrow if he had the time. The little girl happily nodded. At this moment, Amelia approached and asked if she could join them in playing tomorrow. The little girl made a funny face at Amelia, calling her a bad sister and saying she didn't want to play with her.
Emotional then.
Amelia's attempt to touch the girl's head froze instantly, her face displaying embarrassment. The middle-aged couple smiled indulgently, watching the little girl. After exchanging greetings with a few others, the family walked away. In her heart, Amelia thought, what a brat, I didn't even want to play with you. But she still forced a smile and waved her hand. Lu Sheng reassured Amelia, saying not to mind the words of a child. Amelia responded by saying that she wouldn't hold it against the little girl. She then took out her phone and asked Lu Sheng if they could add each other as friends. After a moment of hesitation, Lu Sheng nodded and agreed. Soon, they became friends on an app, and even Luna joined in. Lu Sheng nodded at the two of them as they walked away. As the two girls grew distant, the smile on Lu Sheng's face gradually disappeared, and his gaze became sharper. In a matter of a few breaths, his demeanor transformed from harmless to cold and elusive. Little did he expect that this trip would not only lead him to encounter a rare level 2 psychic master, but also 2 level 2 martial artists. There were also people hiding in the back, doesn't seem wanting to reveal themselves. Lu Sheng was aware that others hadn't discovered his true identity yet. He could now freely control the diffusion and concentration of his psychic power, making it nearly impossible for most people to detect it. Lu Sheng glanced in the direction where the middle-aged couple and the little girl had left, sensing that people are following them, but they seemed weak, and the middle-aged man should be able to handle them. Lu Sheng hoped that they wouldn't interfere with his objectives. Even if they do, he doesn't mind crushing them. With that in mind, Lu Sheng dragged his suitcase and headed towards the direction of the mountain village. Meanwhile, on a certain highway, a muscular man knelt before a man with purple hair. The purple-haired man casually asked if he had found the whereabouts of Tang Mao Lin. The muscular man replied that he had indeed found him. Tang Mao Lin was in Bullhead Mountain, accompanied by his wife and daughter. It seemed like he was trying to hide in the mountains. The purple-haired man furrowed his brow, feeling somewhat displeased. The muscular man quickly assured him that they would be able to accurately locate him. This pleased the purple-haired man, who instructed the muscular man to keep a close eye on Tang Mao Lin until he personally arrived at Bullhead Mountain to deal with him. With an evil grin, he downed his drink, already planning how to torment Tang Mao Lin. Just then, he outstretched his hands, holding the cup to the side towards the woman, a gruesome and disturbing sight where purple liquid was flowing outside of the woman, floating into the cup. The purple-haired man smiled it perversely, with an evil grin, and took out a photo, which was Tang Mao Lin and his family. Lu Sheng, having launched nearly 1,000 attacks, was already familiar